Maximum beard, maximum magic, maximum deck tech. Welcome back to Kaiju Hunter's channel. I've got another MTG online deck tech for you. This is a really cheap deck, apart from like 3 cards that you can probably point out right now. But this is a really awesome burn deck that I built. It's not like the other burn decks in Modern, but it's based on a event deck that came out. I think it was one of the first event decks actually that came out with Mirrored and Besieged. And most of this deck is kind of that, but with some nice little added extras from the rest of the Modern format. So let's go through the cards, eh? Alright, cool. So starting off the land base, we've got 2 Ghitu Encampments, 3 Mutavaults. The man lands are very important for this deck because it just needs that little bit extra damage in there, and just having these guys back in the back row ready to just pop out and go, hey, I'm going to deal 2 damage to you. It's really useful. So the Ghitu Encampments are not as great as the Mutavaults, but I needed red mana, so that's what they are there for. The Mutavaults themselves are absolutely amazing. The colorlessness of the mana that it produces is not such a big deal in this deck, because there's plenty of stuff that runs on colorless mana. The artifacts and some of the higher spells, it's just great. If you're wondering why this deck costs maybe like 27 tickets on Magic Online, it's because of this thing, because it costs about 21 for the 3 of these. I run a little deck list through a online bot thing, just to see how much it actually cost me in the end. And it cost me about 7 tickets for the rest of this deck. And this thing, if you want to run this, you could probably replace the Mutavault with probably like 1 more Ghitu Encampment and then just run a couple more mountains. Like, that's fine. But 19 land, it took me a while to get to there. I ran 21 for a while, then 20, then 18, but back up to 19. It's fairly solid, fairly consistent. It doesn't need a ton of mana to run. The top of the curve is 3 mana in this deck, but you're going to want to hit 3 most of the time, because a lot of the damage dealers are in 2-card combos that you just want to play out in your turn. Into the lower cost things, we got 4 Ornithopters and 4 Memnites. So Ornithopter is not so great by itself, but you get it out with like a Bonesplitter on it. You can rush an Ornithopter Bonesplitter on turn 2, and that's not so bad. It's not as fast as the deck can be, but you really need the Ornithopter there for all the sacrificing artifact cards that we're going to see a bit later. But again, it took me a while to get to these numbers. I was playing like 2 Ornithopters and 4 Memnites, but I really just wanted stuff I could just dump out of my hand. Get them onto the field and start buffing them up with other things like Signal Pest and Goblin Bushwhacker. Bushwhacker is utterly amazing, and you should always run 4. Don't run 3, because you draw more and you just win with this guy. Like, one of these, and one of these is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 damage for 2 mana. And usually a lot more, because if you get Kuldotha Rebirth early, like, I've had games where this guy just fucking wins, and he's just awesome. So, like, I would say in any, like, Goblin-based deck, this guy, just fucking run him, because he is amazing. Signal Pest is equally quite as good. Just that evasion can really piss people off. So expect him to get removed quite a lot. The Bonesplitter, putting him on a Signal Pest is really good. Same with, like, Ornithopter, but more so him, because he doesn't have any base attack himself. He's a little slower, but turn 1 him is a not so bad play. So into the spells now, which is really where the damage is coming from. We've got 2 Goblin Grenades and 4 Shrapnel Blasts, and that's the main sort of combo in the deck. Because it doesn't play like regular burn decks, it plays slightly more like a combo-y burny deck. Not quite like Storm combo burn, but like, you know, I'm going to play a thing and then I'm going to do something to make that thing deal damage to you. And you can set up a lot of neat little 2-3 card combos in your hand. That makes the deck like really fun to play, a lot more than just like pay a mana lightning bolt, turn after turn. You know how it is with burn decks, right? You know how it is. On to the spells next. Most of these are about just sacrificing stuff to deal a bunch of damage. Turn 1 Kuldotha Rebirth is clutch in this deck. You get this going, your opponent has nothing to do with it. You're going to win really fast, especially if you can follow that up with turn 2 Goblin Bushwhacker. You're going in there for 8 damage on turn 2, put him down to 12, and that's where you really want it to be. Like, after the first couple of turns, you want them to be like 8, 10, 12 life. Just getting out the gate there, because then you want to finish it off with your Goblin Grenades and your Shrapnel Blasts for 5 damage for basically no cost. It's amazing in this deck. I did originally want to run this deck with 4 Goblin Grenades and 4 Shrapnel Blasts, but it wasn't enough of a split. Like, there wasn't enough good goblins, and there was too many, not enough artifacts to fuel both the Kuldotha Rebirth and the Shrapnel Blast. So I had to take it on more of like an artifacty kind of side of the whole Goblin Grenade thing. But, you know, there's only, you can see there's probably only like 2 things to make goblins in this deck, but that's why the Goblin Grenade's at 2. But it's still really useful. So you've got like 6 cards in there that are just like sacrifice a thing, deal 2 damage. And they're really great. Kuldotha Rebirth, talked about that. Shrapnel Blast, really good as well. More so for the late game though. Like, you want to get some value out of your Memnite, your Signal Pest, and your Bonesplitter, and your Ornithopter. It's a shame that like Great Furnace isn't legal in Modern, because that would have been great. Just having an artifact land that you just were like, well, get rid of that, deal 5 damage, whatever. Lightning Bolt 4 of burn deck, because you have to. It's basically the law. You have to run 4 Lightning Bolts in your burn deck, no matter what. Now things get a little bit weird. Reverberate, right? So those 2 extra Goblin Grenades I talked about earlier on, I got rid of them and put in 2 Reverberates. And Reverberate is really, really funny in this deck. Just setting off, like, just being able to double up on a whole bunch of things can really fuck your opponent over. Like, turn 4 Shrapnel Blast into Reverberate is 10 damage. You're only sacrificing 1 artifact. The same with Goblin Grenade. Like, Kuldotha Rebirth for 6 tokens on maybe like a turn 3 play, something like that. Or even just like doubling up on a Lightning Bolt. Or like these 2 spells here, which I haven't talked about yet. Just freaking awesome. Especially if your opponent's running burn as well. I haven't been in a fireball situation, but if I were, Reverberate's pretty good to just hold back. And on to the last 2 spells. Right at the top of the curve, I've got 3 Browbeat and 3 Char. The Browbeat is really, really cool. I want to draw cards with this deck. It's really, really clutch. Like, I want to draw at least 1 Browbeat a game. And most people don't run Browbeat at all, because giving your opponent that choice of taking damage and you drawing cards is not great. Often they'll take the damage when you want to draw the cards. They'll pick the worst thing for you, but if your opponent's sitting around like 12, 13 life, sometimes they'll just take the damage, and you've got enough like 5 damage spells, like you got Shrapnel Blast and Goblin Grenade, just to like 2 hits and they're done after that. But really, like, drawing cards is really, really useful in this red deck, like especially if you're up against discard or even control. So yeah, Browbeat, really useful. I really like it. It's good. It's a good fun card, and like, it's a shame that nobody else runs it in Modern, but you can see why, right? And lastly, Char. If you remember my last deck tech running Psionic Blast in my Merfolk deck, again getting in for that 4 damage. Like, the 2 damage to you doesn't really matter with this, but just getting in there, bam for 4 is a lot better than like bam for 3. But like, I've won games where I've charred into a Reverberate, but just dealing like an extra 1 damage than you normally would with the Lightning Bolt is really useful. And the mana cost is quite good with the Mutavaults in the deck and all that shit. And on to the sideboard. I don't really use a lot of the cards in the sideboard most of the time. It's not a really optimal sideboard. The deck itself is fairly efficient as it is, but there are just a couple of very specific things your opponent's deck could do can really mess up the curve of the main deck. And the first one of those is life gain. So, well, primarily it's life gain. And also like some token shenanigans. That's what the Forked Bolt's there for. I've come up against a bunch of Soul Sisters decks, and Forked Bolt kills 2 Soul Sisters. So that's what that's there for. Because you really don't want your opponent getting like too much of a life advantage. Like, at 25 life is, if they go beyond that, you're in real trouble. But being able to just nullify a bunch of Soul Sisters or a bunch of tokens, like them trading Spirit tokens for Goblin tokens off your Rebirth is not cool. And plus, Forked Bolt can deal 2 damage to your opponent. What I really wanted was a one-sided Pyroclasm, but that does not exist in this deck in the format at all. Shattering Spree, because it's cheap and it kills lots and lots of artifacts. I haven't played a ton of artifact decks, but there's been things like engineered explosives that just wreck my tokens, and that's not good fun. So Shattering Spree in there for 4, though I haven't had to side it in yet. It's more of a preventative card. Skullcrack, yes, absolutely Skullcrack. against. I've played that against a bunch of life gain decks. Kitchen Finks is a pain in the ass, and just like them playing Kitchen Finks, because you'll know what's coming. You always know what's coming when you're playing against those decks. Keeping the Skullcrack and then just hitting them as soon as that thing goes on the stack. It's good. It's good for you. Like just negating any sort of life gain with the Skullcrack, even if you have to play it kind of reserved and relying on your instants more than hitting with your dudes. And finally, Leyline of Punishment is a 4 of. Again, I haven't needed to use it yet, but I think it's kind of clutch. The problem is, like, what the hell do I take out of the deck to put these things in? Probably just a little touch of everything, like one Rebirth, maybe one Char, maybe one Reverberate, you know, like just a little bit of everything, and fit these things in. If your opponent's going really heavy life gain. Just talk about a couple other things, stuff that I tried. Let's look at some of the previous versions of the deck here. Ichor Wellspring I tried for a while, and that's really quite cool, especially if you're running a lot of artifact sacrificing, but in this version of the deck I didn't actually have a lot. Like, there's too many artifacts. I wasn't having to sacrifice these two guys, so they weren't so useful. Ichor Wellspring's pretty good though. I've seen similar decks like this in the casual rooms, and that's a pretty good place to start. It just keeps you drawing cards, which is really great. Anything else sort of odd? No, nothing there. This was another version I wrote out long ago. So Pyrite Spellbomb might work kind of good in the deck, because it's cheap artifact and you can burn something or you can draw a card. It just gives you a bunch of options. Arsonist, I've seen that run in several similar decks as well, but again, like the Goblin angle didn't work out for me. Too great. You gotta get those Bushwhackers in there, man. You gotta get them in. They're really cool. Evolving the deck further, there might be some cool scry cards I could try. Like Magna Jet might work out kind of cool in this. Just being able to like fix my draws would be really useful. Drawing into like mini combo pieces. If I was gonna splash another color, I'd probably splash in black. I could probably get the black-red Manland in there. He's pretty cool. Can't remember his name. Reign of Gore would be really useful in the sideboard. Was it 1 black, 1 red? Players, whenever a player would gain life, they lose that much life instead. That would be really fun. And also just some general removal would be nice for the sideboard. Just getting rid of big creatures, but they're not really a problem a lot of the time. Like, this deck just sort of works with the main deck, and it works fairly well. Like, win-loss ratios, I win quite a lot with it. And it just splooges on your opponent. It's really awesome. And it's not like your regular burn deck where you're just like, play spell, deal damage, next turn, draw a card, play a spell, burn spell. You're doing like little cool little iterate combos. You're fixing up fancy lines of creatures just to attack your opponent. Like, it's got a lot of good fun choices on your side, and it's a really good fun deck to play. So that's it for this deck tech. My next deck is probably going to be ninjas. I want to build a modern ninja deck. I've seen some really cool lists out there, but we'll get to that later. After I build that deck, I really should just sit down and make a proper competitive-y, you know, top-tier-y thingy modern deck. Probably with Esper colors, maybe gifts, maybe Tezzeret artifact control. I don't know. They're all kind of cool. But the cool thing about them is they've got similar cards. Like, I'm gonna need the blue-black dual lands, so for the ninja decks, I'm not gonna get them, you know. Anyway, guys, that'll do it for this deck tech. Like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. Check out our Facebook page. I'll see you in the next video.